go for a walk, pal.
F is for friends who do stuff together, and there are plenty of friends in the world of Bikini Bottom. Naturally, some of these friendships are stronger than others, and some of these relationships would probably be better off separated. But which of these relationships are the healthiest under the sea? And which ones are about as toxic as a burger from the Chum Bucket? I'm Kyle with Wicked Binge, and these are SpongeBob relationships healthy to toxic. As always, we'll be starting with our strongest and healthiest relationship and working our way down to the most toxic. These relationships are the healthy. Our gold medal of healthiness has to go to Sandy and SpongeBob. When it comes to all of SpongeBob's friends, Sandy is probably the one who has given him the least amount of grief and frustration. Whenever the two of them have any conflict, they usually tend to communicate their concerns in an honest way. And even when the other person doesn't listen at first, like SpongeBob with his squirrel jokes, or Sandy with some of her specific goals whenever she's hyper-focusing on them, they usually get it and apologize or make up for it eventually, as they tend to care a lot about what the other thinks. They're also usually willing to help each other out, and are very protective of each other. And of course, they also enjoy doing karate together. It's not a flawless friendship, as they both have strong personalities that can sometimes clash, but their tendencies to work it out in the end more than earn them the gold medal of healthy. Taking our silver medal of healthiness is a newer relationship in the show, and a bit of a surprising one: Plankton and Spot. First appearing in Plankton's Pet, Spot proved to be the perfect amoeba for Plankton from the very start. While Plankton was a bit out of his depth as a pet owner, he still cared about treating Spot well, never only seeing him as a tool that could help him get the Krabby Patty secret formula. Even when Plankton is frustrated with Spot and tries to scold him, he just can't be mean to him. In turn, Spot is incredibly loyal and affectionate towards Plankton, protecting him from danger and showing him tons of love. It's quite adorable, and we're happy to have it as one of the main elements in the modern day seasons. Moving on to our bronze medal of healthiness, we have the girls' night trio of Sandy, Mrs. Puff, and Karen. It is nice to see a good trio of gal pals, and to be honest, it's a wonder these three weren't paired up sooner, as the episode Girls' Night Out shows them getting along really well. Of course, the three of them have fun together, blowing off steam and playing pranks, but they also listen to each other vent and offer each other sympathy and support when it comes to their respective stressful lives. Admittedly, you could argue that the group does sort of bring the worst out of them, given some of the pranks they pull, but in the end, we're just happy seeing them enjoying themselves and each other. We're going to be ranking the dynamic duo of Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy next. It may be a bit contentious to put this relationship so high up, given the episode where Barnacle Boy briefly becomes a villain, or even all the times where Barnacle Boy is just annoyed by Mermaid Man. But in all honesty, for the most part, it's just mild annoyance at best, and even that could be attributed to their age. In terms of actual interactions, the two of them still managed to work together well and have each other's backs. And even when Barnacle Boy became evil, he only did so to send a message. Once it was clear that he just wanted some respect, Mermaid Man was more than happy to give it, and the two became friends again. It's not the happiest relationship around, but it's stable and they truly feel like two old friends who always drift back towards each other. Next, we have the adorable pet and owner relationship between SpongeBob and Gary. A dog may be man's best friend, but a snail is clearly a sponge's best friend. While Gary may sometimes be exasperated by his owner's various shenanigans, it's obvious that he cares about SpongeBob's well-being just as much as SpongeBob cares about his. There have been brief lapses of judgment on SpongeBob's part, like when he was too focused on his paddleball challenge to feed Gary, or when he tried to push Gary into things he didn't want to do. But in all of these instances, SpongeBob was immediately remorseful once he realized what he had done and promised to do better. Gary can also be a bit bratty, like when he doesn't want to take a bath or when he wants extra treats. But again, these are only brief instances that don't overshadow all the positive and loving parts of their relationship. Following them, we have Pearl and SpongeBob. Although maybe not the most expected friendship, and certainly not one that gets a ton of focus, SpongeBob and Pearl still manage to be good friends. It may be a bit one-sided, as SpongeBob is usually the one helping Pearl, either by showing her a good time at the prom, helping her quit her job, or buying her a ton of birthday presents. But at the very least, Pearl always appreciates his efforts. She's sometimes a bit mean and distant with him in her attempts to be seen as cool, but she always makes her gratitude clear in the end, and even comforts him when things don't work out, like in the prom episode. Add in the fact that SpongeBob seems to care more about her than Mr. Krabs does at times, and you've got yourself a pretty positive relationship in spite of how rarely they interact. And wrapping up the good section, we're giving a shout out to SpongeBob and Larry. Originally, it almost seemed like SpongeBob and Larry were going to be rivals, given how SpongeBob seemed somewhat jealous of Larry in episodes like Ripped Pants and Muscle Bob Buff Pants. Thankfully, the show never went down that route, and Larry ends up being another friend for SpongeBob. They may not always see eye to eye given their differences in personality, and Larry can sometimes be a bit blunt, but whether it's being lifeguards together, running Larry's gym together, or Larry helping out the Krusty crew, the two of them are shown to get along pretty well. It's not the closest relationship, but it is a relationship that has very little friction for the most part. And with our good relationships wrapped up, we now move into more neutral territory. These are the relationships that have some merit and their own positives, but they also have a couple of concerning flaws. Welcome to the gray area. Starting this tier off are BFFs SpongeBob and Patrick. Now, on the one hand, these two are a pretty iconic bromance. They play together, support and help each other out, and have gone on some pretty amazing adventures together. What's more, they understand each other better than anyone else in Bikini Bottom. But, on the other hand, Patrick's tendency to lean towards selfishness and gluttony in his worst moments make their friendship seem just a bit one-sided and toxic at times.
You stole my candy bar!
No, I didn't.
For as much as they clearly love each other and will always come back together in the end, it can't be denied that Patrick makes SpongeBob's life a lot harder, not being nearly as loyal towards SpongeBob as SpongeBob is to him, and he isn't always apologetic about it. Thankfully, newer episodes like Goodbye Krabby Patty have begun to rectify some of the worst parts of their dynamic that were seen in the middle seasons of the show. Finishing off the Conch Street trio, we have Squidward and SpongeBob. Their relationship is, in a word, complicated. For the most part, the status quo is that while SpongeBob sees him as one of his best friends, Squidward can hardly stand to be near him. Not that we can necessarily blame Squidward, since SpongeBob can be annoying, as well as very clingy and even downright stalkerish at times. But for as much as Squidward yells and insults him, SpongeBob is always willing to help him out, only wanting him to be happy. This leads to the rare moments where Squidward will either defend SpongeBob, like in Pizza Delivery or Born Again Krabs, or will do something truly nice for him, like in Christmas Who and Dying for Pie. We've seen several times that when Squidward gets wrapped up in the shenanigans, he and SpongeBob are able to work together very well, even having fun and bonding with one another. Squidward has even admitted that he secretly likes SpongeBob, and that he'd rather live and work with him than without him, as shown in Squidville and SpongeBob You're Fired.
Please come back and be the fry cook again.
Unfortunately, these positive moments are still on the somewhat rare side of things, hence why we can't rank this dynamic any higher. Next, let's take a look at Plankton and SpongeBob. Even though they may technically be enemies, which prevents them from having a true friendship. But hey, you can't blame a sponge for reaching out in the hopes of bringing Plankton to the good side. Of course, Plankton rarely ever takes SpongeBob up on that offer, caring more about the secret formula. Every once in a while though, the two of them are able to genuinely get along. Plankton may not understand SpongeBob, or kindness in general, but he does seem to secretly enjoy how SpongeBob is able to help him. The second movie is a pretty great example of this, and even if things don't quite end up happily ever after, it's obvious that these frenemies are perfectly capable of being actual friends. From Chum Bucket to boating school, next we have SpongeBob and Mrs. Puff. When it comes to teachers, Mrs. Puff tends to be average at best. She tries, sure, but she does tend to go to extremes when pushed to her limit, regarding either stress or anger. She once tried to kill SpongeBob in a demolition derby, and we certainly can't forget all the lying in Grand Theft Auto from No Free Rides. But while SpongeBob certainly doesn't deserve to be murdered, his carelessness behind the wheel, especially in the modern episodes, has begun to feel less naive and innocent and more just cruel, even if it's not on purpose. SpongeBob may care about and respect his teacher, but if he really cared about her, maybe he would just finally drop out of boating school. And wrapping up our gray area is one of the show's few romantic relationships, Mr. Krabs and Mrs. Puff. Originally just an admittedly sweet one-shot idea, the modern-day crew of SpongeBob decided to bring this pairing back, and for what it's worth, they do manage to have a couple more cute and flirty moments. However, there have also been plenty of moments where Krabs' obsession with either money or plankton have ruined an interaction between them, making Puff feel more like a secondary importance to him. It's still a bit too soon to say if this relationship will last, but for as much as we may hope for the best, we can't say that we see a Krabs-Puff wedding in the near future. And we've finally arrived at the more troubling relationships on this side of the ocean. These relationships are the toxic. Just outside the podium of toxicity is SpongeBob and Mr. Krabs. Probably the best example of a toxic professional relationship. There is very little positive when it comes to Krabs and SpongeBob. At best, Krabs is like a surrogate father to him, but at worst, he only cares about getting as much work and money out of SpongeBob as possible. He's constantly pulling SpongeBob into his get-rich-quick schemes, not caring about his physical well-being or moral concerns. It's only when SpongeBob starts cutting into Krabs' bottom line that he actually bothers trying to figure out what's wrong with him. It's a classic case of a greedy boss taking advantage of their loyal employee, and while Krabs does have his kinder moments, he still doesn't deserve a hard worker like SpongeBob as far as we're concerned. Earning our bronze medal of toxicity is the romance between Plankton and Karen. It's a shame that we have to rank these two so low on our list, as there have been plenty of moments where Plankton and Karen show that they love and care about each other, to the point of even having date nights. But for the most part, Plankton just takes Karen for granted, while Karen is known for being fairly unsupportive, and surely with her comments. At worst, Karen will outright attack Plankton, while Plankton has had a couple occasions where he's technically cheated on her. First by pursuing Krabs' mother, and then by replacing her with Karen 2.0. It's truly hard to appreciate the sweeter moments from this couple when you remember just how dysfunctional and occasionally loveless their marriage is. For our silver medal of toxicity, we're giving it to Mr. Krabs and Pearl. So much for being Daddy's little girl. To Krabs' credit, he does love Pearl and wants her to be happy. He just happens to love his money a lot more, to the point where he serves stale popcorn and cardboard cake at her Sweet 16. In that sense, you can't exactly blame Pearl for having such little respect for her dad, not wanting to hang out with him and only interacting with him when she wants money to go shopping. Thankfully, as bad as their relationship is, the earlier seasons do have Krabs being fairly loving, such as when he gives her control of the Krusty Krab, or when he makes sure that she has a date for prom. He certainly has the capacity to care, and when compared to other Nickelodeon parents, isn't nearly as neglectful as he could be, but that doesn't stop his greed from often overshadowing his fatherly love. And finally, our gold medal of toxicity is going to the forever rivalry between Plankton and Mr. Krabs. Out of all of the SpongeBob relationships, this one is the most destructive as well as the most codependent. Simply put, Krabs and Plankton depend on each other and the rivalry. Whenever one of them tries to find peace or make a truce or move on with their life, they end up falling back into their unending game, all because their rivalry seemingly gives them purpose. It's a fight they're destined to have forever, and it's almost tragic in a way. What's more is that their rivalry just brings out the absolute worst in them. From Krabs scaring Plankton into ending himself once he finds out Plankton's fear of whales, to Plankton disguising himself as a lady made out of cash and tricking Krabs into marriage, not caring if he breaks his heart. While they may technically give each other a purpose and can even work together on a rare occasion, there's very little positive to this relationship between this pair of enemies.